Hey, welcome into Sports Map Houston. I'm Brandon Strange. I'm joined by Paul Gallant, which you can now hear on The Paul Gallant Show, weekdays from 10 to noon on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 FM. If you haven't yet, please hit subscribe on this channel. We do appreciate it. Make sure you follow Paul as well on his channel. Hey, Paul, welcome in. Unfortunately, we got to talk about the Texans. This was a game this week against the Bears in which many people predicted Houston could win. If not at least cover the spread, I guess. If I gave you a multiple choice in which you cannot select all of the above, if I gave you a multiple choice, in your mind, what was the main culprit on Sunday that led to this defeat at the hands of Chicago? Was it Lovey's defense? Was it Pep Hamilton's play calling? Was it Davis Mills' quarterback play? Or was it a general lack of talent on the roster?
The last one's depressing and it rings true. Man, that is difficult to pick one from. So you can't say it's the defense because even though they gave up 281 yards on the ground, they did get takeaways, they did get sacks, they did make plays. So it has to be between Davis Mills and Pep Hamilton, your offensive coordinator. It was not a fun day for Davis Mills. He was late on those two passes that were intercepted. I know one was deflected at the line of scrimmage, but I think Roquan Smith would have caught that anyway. But at the very least, Mills did make some throws over the middle of the field. It's a really low bar that he's got to clear. To me, it's about Pep Hamilton. This team struggles to run in obvious running situations. They routinely get stuffed, not just for no gain, for a loss when they're trying to get the ball forward in short yardage situations. And they turned away from Dameon Pierce, understandably so, after two fumbles, but we've seen this now twice this year, where Dameon Pierce has been pulled off the field entirely at the end of the game against the Colts for Rex Burkhead, and at the end of the game this past Sunday against Chicago after his second fumble. This team is not talented enough to get away from Dameon Pierce being on the field. They have to have him out there as much as they possibly can. They've had a tough time running the football. They're running screen plays to tight end Pharaoh Brown. It's been very confusing and disappointing because I didn't have any expectations, Brandon, going into the year for Davis Mills. I did have expectations and some hope for Pep Hamilton. It's been very gross offensively to begin the season.
Well, we'll get back to Mills in a second because I think a lot of your points are really good, and we'll circle back to that. But I do want to there is something interesting about giving up 281 yards on the ground that you mentioned, 157 of those being to their backup running back. There is something about, like, even though that wasn't the problem necessarily, I agree with you, there's been 3 weeks in which they've been competitive, and it's not necessarily, on the defense. But Lovie Smith is a defensive-minded head coach. Are you surprised to see the defense continue to get torched on the ground, considering the resources that the front office has put into the line and the linebackers?
The linebackers just aren't good, and I think that's the big frustration. Brandon, they've made an investment in young talent in the defensive backfield. Jalen Petrie had 2 interceptions and a sack. Derek Stingley Jr., at the very least, is holding his own in coverage, though doesn't seem to like contact. But Christian Kirksey and Camus Grugier-Hill are over-pursuing. They're not filling their gaps. They are just looking, I think, completely out of place in the middle of that field. And, this is not a Lovie Smith defense of old with the Chicago Bears where you got Brian Urlacher or Lance Briggs or Charles Peanut Tillman in the middle. This is a team that needs talent and on that interior. A lot of missed tackles, and something I am curious about. Lovie Smith does like to see teams take the football away, and I think he wants at all times his defenders to be trying to pull the football out. Well, is that perhaps leading to some of the missed tackles that we're seeing? We've seen a lot of them. There's a lot of guys going after running backs for the other team with just arms, and look, you got to put your shoulder or body into guys to bring them down to the ground. That's just a lack of fundamentals, and you have to pin that on Lovie Smith, this inability to tackle right now. But, going back to what you were saying a little bit earlier, too, the talent on the interior, whether it's the defensive line or the linebackers, they're just getting absolutely abused right now. And to lose to a team with a quarterback like that in Justin Fields, who even said himself he was trash yesterday, a one-dimensional team like that ran for 281 yards on you. That didn't happen last season, and the Bears haven't done that since 1984.
So let's switch to the offense because we have to. 0 for 4 on 3rd and 1s on Sunday. Shut out again in the fourth quarter. That makes a total of 30-0 that they've been shut out in third quarters over the first 3 games. The Texans have been competitive in those games, though. In their first 3 games, they've been competitive. We know that they are in the midst of a massive rebuild. You talked about expectations. So the expectation wasn't that they were going to be good this year, and they've been competitive. So let me ask you this. Why does it feel worse? But, why does it feel worse? We know that they weren't going to be, chasing, contending for anything, contending for the division. That's what you would say, like, okay, they're going to lose, but we hope they would be competitive, that they'd be in all these games. Does it feel worse because the shortfalls are so acutely related to Davis Mills, the implications of which are if he's not the guy, then the rebuild gets set back even further?
But I think we all, I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking for myself here, Brandon. I never was that convinced in Davis Mills. Most quarterbacks aren't the guy, and it's nothing against those quarterbacks. It's really difficult to be a really special quarterback in this league. And as someone who grew up rooting for Tom Brady, I have a high standard. This guy ain't it. I think more frustrating is that they should have won all 3 of these games. They had an opportunity to against the Colts up 20-3. They had an opportunity to against a Broncos offense that right now has no idea how to move the football last week. And on Sunday against a Bears team that is having similar issues offensively, maybe not running the football, but definitely throwing the ball. And you're in these games all the way to the end, and you're doing all of the things that you expect a losing football team to. I think that because of that, you're hoping to see a slightly more competitive team this year with some of the veterans that they have. They're one of the older teams in the NFL, surprisingly, even with a lot of young players out there right now. You were thinking, okay, well, maybe this is like a 6 or a 7-win team or something like that. When they're losing like this to not good teams, it just feels like that light at the end of the tunnel is even fainter than it had been before. And I get it that this is a rebuild, but at the same time, this fan base has been through a lot, and we're all sick and tired of watching a team that sucks. People want to see at the very least some sort of progress. Where is the progress? It just feels like this team doesn't know how to win. And that's kind of what they've been for years.
So if I'm hearing you right, and the Texans finish out the season on the current trajectory, end up with another high draft pick, you're thinking target a quarterback.
Oh, quarterback, yes. Yeah. I'm already, and we plan to do this the rest of the week on the show. We're starting to look at quarterbacks in this coming draft class. I don't care. May as well get a head start on it because Mills ain't the guy.
Well, that's a good promo. Make sure you listen to Paul Gallant weekdays from 10 a.m. to noon on ESPN 97.5, 92.5. Paul, appreciate the time as always.
Thanks, Brandon.